The storm rolled in faster than anyone expected. The sky, once clear and blue, turned a menacing gray. Winds howled across the open fields of Georgia, bending trees and rattling the loose tin roof of Samuel Johnson's farmhouse. Samuel, a humble black farmer in his 60s, had lived his whole life on that patch of land. It wasn't much, but it was his home, a legacy from his father and grandfather before him. He'd spent years tending the soil, raising chickens, and growing corn to make a simple but honest living. That afternoon, as he finished tying down his last chicken coop, he noticed a car struggling down the dirt road that led past his property. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, and thunder rolled like cannon fire. The car's tires sank into the mud, spinning helplessly. Without hesitation, Samuel grabbed his old raincoat and ran toward it. Inside were a young white couple, David and Emily Miller, terrified and drenched, with nowhere to go. "Y'all all right?" Samuel shouted over the storm. David tried to smile but was clearly shaken. "Our car's stuck. We can't see a thing out here." "Come on," Samuel said kindly. "You'll catch your death sittin' out here. My house ain't much, but it's dry." The couple exchanged a quick glance before nodding. They followed him through the pouring rain, slipping and sliding until they reached his small wooden farmhouse. Inside, it was simple but warm. A crackling fire burned in the old brick fireplace, and the smell of fresh cornbread filled the air. "Sit yourselves down," Samuel said, handing them towels. "I'll get some tea on." As thunder crashed outside, the couple thanked him repeatedly. Emily looked around at the neatly kept but worn furniture, the photos of a younger Samuel standing proudly with his late wife, and the rows of books stacked along the window. "You live here all alone?" she asked softly. "Been that way a few years now," Samuel replied, stirring the kettle. "Lost my wife to cancer. Kids moved up north, but the Lord still gives me breath, so I tend the land like my daddy taught me." The couple smiled, touched by his calm spirit. For the next several hours, they talked as the storm raged outside. Samuel shared stories about the land, how his grandfather had once worked it after being freed from slavery, and how he'd fought to keep it despite hard times and prejudice. David listened, humbled. "You've got a good heart, sir. Not many people would open their doors to strangers these days." Samuel chuckled. "When someone's in trouble, color don't matter much. We all bleed the same when the storm hits." Eventually, the storm passed. The next morning, sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the wet fields gold. Samuel helped tow their car out of the mud, gave them breakfast, and waved goodbye as they left, figuring he'd never see them again. But fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, Samuel was feeding his chickens when a large truck pulled up in front of his house. Out stepped David and Emily, both smiling from ear to ear. Behind them were several men carrying building materials, wood, bricks, and paint. "Mr. Johnson," David called out, "we've been thinking about what you did for us that night. You didn't know us, but you opened your home. That kind of kindness, it's rare. We wanted to do something for you." Samuel looked puzzled. "What are y'all talking about?" Emily stepped forward, her eyes shining. "We own a small construction company. We're going to rebuild your house, stronger, bigger, and safer." Samuel's mouth fell open. "Now hold on," he said. "You don't owe me nothing. I didn't help you for payment." David smiled. "We know. That's exactly why we want to do this." For the next several weeks, the quiet farm buzzed with activity. Trucks came and went, tools clattered, and laughter echoed through the fields. Samuel tried to help, but the workers insisted he sit back and relax. Every day, David and Emily stopped by to chat with him, learning more about his life and his late wife. They wanted to build a home that honored both his past and his kindness. As the house took shape, the entire community began to notice. Some neighbors, who had once ignored Samuel because of his race or modest means, came by to lend a hand. The project became more than just a construction job, it was a symbol of unity and gratitude. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, David sat on the porch steps beside Samuel. "You know," he said, "before that night, I used to think the world was too divided to ever come together again. But you changed that for me." Samuel smiled. "Storms have a way of showing who we really are. You can't choose the weather, but you can choose how you treat folks in it." When the house was finally complete, it was a beautiful, sturdy 2-story home with wide windows and a wraparound porch. The Millers held a small ceremony to hand Samuel the keys. Tears welled in his eyes as he stepped through the front door, seeing the framed photo of his wife placed lovingly on the mantel. Emily whispered, "We wanted her to be the first thing you see when you walk in." Samuel turned to them, his voice trembling. "I ain't got much to give, but you'll always have a place here. Y'all are family now." The story spread across the county, and then across the nation. Local news stations covered it, calling it the miracle at Maple Road. People from all over sent letters to Samuel, thanking him for reminding the world what compassion looks like. Months passed, and the friendship between Samuel and the Millers only grew stronger. They shared Sunday dinners, worked the garden together, and often sat on the porch watching the sunset. For Samuel, who had once felt forgotten by the world, life had come full circle. One spring afternoon, Emily asked him, "Do you ever regret anything, Mr. Johnson?" He chuckled softly. "Only that my wife ain't here to see this. But I figure she's smilin' down on us from heaven. She always said, kindness is the seed you plant that grows when you least expect it." Guess she was right. As time went on, Samuel's story inspired others. Churches used it in sermons about love and unity. Schools told it to teach children about empathy and the power of doing good without expecting anything in return. And on quiet evenings, when the crickets sang and the wind rustled through the cornfields, Samuel would sit on his new porch, rocking gently in his chair, feeling deeply grateful. He'd look up at the stars and whisper, "Thank you, Lord. You took one storm and turned it into a blessing." One day, a young reporter visited him to write an article about his story. She asked, "Mr. Johnson, what would you say to people who think small acts don't matter?" Samuel smiled that warm, weathered smile. "I'd say a single candle can light a whole room. Sometimes, helping one person is all it takes to change 100 hearts." David and Emily never forgot that night either. They often told their friends that the storm didn't just lead them to Samuel's door, it led them to a new way of living. They began sponsoring community projects, repairing homes for struggling families, and creating scholarships for local students. And every time they did, they'd say, "This is for Mr. Johnson." Years later, when Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep, the Millers were there. They buried him beneath a large oak tree on his land, just beside the fields he had loved so much. On his tombstone, they engraved the words he had once told them. "When the storm comes, kindness is the shelter." After his funeral, the Millers continued to care for his land, turning it into a community farm where people of all races and backgrounds could come together to learn, share, and grow. They called it Johnson's Haven. Every harvest season, they'd hold a festival there, music, food, laughter, and stories. And every year, someone new would hear the tale of the farmer who opened his door on a stormy night and changed the world with a simple act of kindness. Because in the end, it wasn't the new house, the news coverage, or the fame that mattered. It was the reminder that goodness still exists, that compassion can bridge any divide, and that one man's open heart can build more than a home, it can build hope. And as the wind whispered through the trees of Johnson's Haven, it carried Samuel's legacy far and wide, that even in the darkest storm, love will always find its way home.